Coming up with part 5 on Muckle, chapter 11 on the family. We're down to kinship and family relationships. A lineage or descent group. We've seen this, lineal, unilineal, patrilineal, etc. This is a group of people descended from a common ancestor. Um, and then sometimes people construct family from unrelated people. So you have an uncle so and so who's not really related at all, but you call him uncle, whatever. This is a demonstration that kinship can be fictive, and really, um, when you think about it, all kinship is fictive. All kinship, no matter how um, direct the blood or genetic ties are, it's a relationship. It's a social relationship, and so it demands regular social reinforcement for it to be a meaningful relationship. Nurture kinship, we can think of if you have mentorship relations with a mentor, a work mentor or a professional person you go to for advice. Bilateral kinship involves joint descent from both mother and father. So if you've been wondering about this unilineal descent that we're talking about here, um, and you think it's weird, it's you who are weird. The United States, Western Europe, Hawaiians, Arctic people, and hunter-gatherers have bilateral descent. They reckon descent through both the mother and the father. Everyone else, pretty much everyone on the planet, who's not from northern Western Europe, the United States, um, Hawaii, or the South Pacific, the Arctic Circle, or hunter-gatherers. Everyone else, it's unilineal. So unilineal descent is the norm for most people. It's singular descent either through the father or the mother. Most societies in the world have unilineal descent. Patrilineal, it's traced through the father's line only. Matrilineal, it's through the mother's line only. So yes, you are related to your mother, but you're not a member of her family. Her family is her father's family. Your family is your father's family. Or if it was matrilineal, yes, you are related to your father. He is your dad, but you're not related to his family. His parents are not part of your real family. Your real family is on your mom's side, your uncles, and and their parents. Okay, gender and sex. So that's we're done with family. On to gender, the second half here. Gender and sex, we're going to talk about gender roles, which are patterned by culture. Um, Gender identity involves social and cultural norms on one side, biology on the other side. A binary approach with two male and female is only one of numerous options, and we will get into those. Defining sex, gender, and sexuality. Sex tends to be referring to biological and physiological differences. Sex chromosomes, that's primary. You have XX or XY. Um, this is the genetic code that produces the gonads, the testicles and ovaries, which produce hormones, and then these hormones are what sort of reproduce gender as we see it. Reproductive structures and external genitalia, all part of the biological and physiological differences that then go on to secondary sexual characteristics such as beards and breasts and all that. Sexuality, in contrast, has typically referred to romantic or physical attraction, which isn't necessarily connected to sex. And then gender isn't necessarily connected to either of those, because gender is a set of social meanings assigned by culture concerning a person's internal experience of identity as male, female, both, neither, as well as the not only the internal experience of that, but the outward expression of that identity as well, which may not necessarily correlate either. And then finally, the fourth thing here has to do with intersex. These are physiological or morphological traits that place people, intersex people on a gender spectrum in a way that does not allow simple definition of male or female. 1 in 2,000 births have indeterminate genitalia or multiple reproductive organs, both male and female. So, I mean, we're getting into relatively rare, but that's what anthropology loves. We love rare cases, the boundaries and the people who don't fit these normative stereotypes. Gender roles, so that was the first one, was defining definitions of sex, gender, sexuality, and intersex. Gender roles, these are culturally appropriate roles of individuals in society that express the cultural norms expected of a person of each sex. How are you supposed to behave based on the sex that you have been assigned, or the gender that you have been assigned? So we have masculine, feminine, and androgynous roles usually in every society. And sometimes those are more mixed, and sometimes those are more exclusive. Gender identity is predetermined by biological factors and formed through interactions with others in society. So you inhabit a gender, or you identify with a gender, and then your society around you also identifies you, and it's this iterative process of identity construction. Cisgender. This is what happens when your gender identity matches your assigned sex at birth. So you're born into a male body, and as you come into maturity, you continue to identify with that male body. Transgender. This is where the gender identity more closely matches a gender other than what was assigned at birth. We have a term here, gender queer or gender fluid. These are people who express their identity or gender, their identity or expression along a spectrum or in a non-binary way. And then gender dysphoria is sometimes people who, especially people who are not cisgender, who are transgender, can experience their gender identity as non-conforming. So they feel some distress due to social expectations of how they're supposed to behave, versus how their own gender identity and expression leads them to behave. Third genders. Many societies recognize multiple genders, often 3, 4, or 5 genders. Typical Native American gender identity is called two-spirit. So the thing here is that gender is associated not with bodies, but with spirit. So it's a much less material determination. And so if you have a feminine spirit, then you're a woman. If you have a masculine spirit, then you're a man. Not really mattering so much what your body is, but more about what your spirit is. And two-spirit people have both masculine and feminine gender spirits, and so they're seen as somehow separated out from other maybe ordinary people who have just a single spirit. And then third gender, the people who are assigned neither female nor female gender. So we have the Hijras of India and Pakistan, and Bangladesh too, I think, has Hijras. These are people who live separately in communities and play important social roles in ritual and everyday life. So there's certain ceremonies that they have to be present at, or they have to officiate, or something like that. It's not all wonderful. There are some aspects of their life that expose them to higher levels of social and economic exclusion, and they do experience higher levels of personal violence. But overall, Indian and Pakistani societies, one of which is Hindu and one of which is Muslim, permit pansexuality and gender fluidity in really interesting ways, and provide completely socially acceptable and ordinary social roles for people who identify with neither male nor female. Sexual identity, we have to talk about sexuality here. Sexual orientation means romantic or sexual attraction to another person. Gender identity and sexual orientation are independent of one another. It's important to note that any kind of person may be heterosexual, homosexual, etc. Just because someone is presenting in a transgender way doesn't mean that they necessarily are seeking a same-sex or opposite-sex partner automatically. There should be no assumption of that. And I'll put on a video after this. I'll link to a video from YouTube which helps explain that, and it's a little bit critical, but if you're interested, you can follow up. In some societies, homosexual practices can be essential to society without any accompanying identity or orientation. So the Itoro Society in Papua New Guinea requires temporary periods of homosexual practices for all boys before they can become men. So in order to become men, boys have to participate in oral sex with older boys, and then after they do that for a period of a few years, then they've consumed enough semen that they can start producing it themselves, and then they get married. So there's no identity, there's no gender identity associated with this. Everyone goes through it. All men go through it. All boys go through it, and then all men go through it, and they end up getting married and live what they would be seeing as heterosexual lives. They don't continue to have sexual relationships with men afterwards. At least not most of them. I'm going to stop here and pick it up next time.